In history books, one can read that Croats killed Yugoslav king. In another book, one could read that Macedonians killed the king. In third book, one could read that Bulgarians killed him. Who actually killed King Alexander? Which version is correct? Apparently all three. How is this possible? And what about that famous statement that Serbs kill all their leaders? Well, this time Serbs didn't do it. This was another stereotype constructed by Serb enemies. Serbs didn't kill more leaders than other nations did. During the same time frame, 1865-1903, Serbs killed 2 rulers while Americans killed 3 presidents. Everyone always talks about Lincoln, but Garfield, 1881, and McKinley, 1901, were also killed. Now, back to the topic. Who was Alexander and how did he inspire such vast coalition of assassins against him? Since 1800s, Serbia had 2 ruling families who were fighting one another. They were Obrenović and Karađorđević. Alexander was born in 1888 while his family lived in exile in Montenegro. His father was Petar Karađorđević. His mother was Montenegrin princess Zorka. Zorka died in childbirth when she was only 25. Alexander was only 2 years old at the time. He grew up with a sister Jelena and older brother George. In 1903, Petar became Serbian king after the assassination of the last Obrenović king. It is unclear how much Petar was involved in the plot to assassinate the last Obrenović. It is historical fact that members of Black Hand weren't tried for regicide. Black Hand was a secret military organization. Most people know about them because they were involved in the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which led to World War I. Some people see Alexander's assassination in 1934 as karma. Coincidentally, the last Obrenović king was also called Alexander. Prince Alexander became regent to his father. In 1918, a new country was formed, Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. King Petar died in 1921 and he was the last Serbian king. His successors were Yugoslav kings. The new king became Alexander. But what happened to his older brother George? This is a very dark story, and King Alexander is usually portrayed as the villain. In 1909, George beat his servant to death in a fit of rage. At the time, he was the heir to Serbian throne. King Petar decided that George cannot inherit. During World War I, George fought bravely and became popular in the army. The story says that Alexander was afraid that conspirators could make George a king. In 1925, Alexander had George arrested and sent to mental hospital. Many Serbs saw this as injustice. During World War II, Germans released George from the mental hospital. After World War II, George was the only member of Karađorđević family to remain in Serbia. Communists embraced the story how George was the victim of his own family. It was another reason to despise King Alexander. What else did he do? Personally, I dislike King Alexander. There is nothing nice I can say about him. He made such a mess that it is surprising he wasn't killed earlier. A person can be accidentally involved in one controversy. But King Alexander was always part of some controversy. I don't blame him for the murders of Obrenović royal couple. Alexander was only 15 when they were killed. His first major controversy was the 1917 Salonika trial. Black Hand became a problem for the Karađorđević dynasty. They had too much power and were bad for the image of Serbia. Fortunately for the royals, most Black Hand members died in the wars 1912-1918, but the leader Dragutin Dimitrievich Apis remained alive. In 1917, Apis was accused of trying to kill Prince Alexander. The Salonika trial was completely fabricated. Apis was executed by the firing squad. Instead of being tried for the things he actually did, Apis was convicted of something he didn't do. Prince Alexander made a mockery of the justice system. Next came the creation of Yugoslavia. Alexander is nicknamed Ujedinitelj, English the Unifier. He was one of the main creators of Yugoslavia. Now, many claim that Yugoslavia was actually Great Serbia in disguise. Alexander didn't know how to rule over a diverse country. Non-Serbs were unhappy with their position. They wanted more power in their hands. Non-Serbs felt as if they were tricked into joining Yugoslavia. They were promised one thing and got something completely different. Serbs were unhappy with how Alexander was trying to replace Serbian identity with Yugoslav. The best example is what happened to Žrnov. Žrnov was a medieval fortress on Mountain Avala near Belgrade. Serbs built Žrnov, and the fortress survived many wars over the centuries. In 1934, King Alexander decided to blow up Žrnov with explosives. He wanted to build a monument of the unknown hero where Žrnov stood. Belgraders begged him to spare Žrnov. Avala is not the biggest mountain in the world, but there was enough space for both Žrnov and the monument. King Alexander didn't care how people felt. Žrnov was destroyed and cannot be rebuilt. I think that destroying such old buildings is a criminal act. And it shows that King Alexander didn't care about Serbian history and heritage. He only cared about establishing a new Yugoslav identity. Alexander was against communism. Many Yugoslav citizens were sent to prisons for being communists. They were given harsh sentences, like 5 to 10 years, for their political activities. Alexander's persecution of the communists actually helped the Communist Party flourish. Many workers joined the party as an act of defiance. Alexander's actions only made the problem bigger instead of solving it. Many students were kicked out of universities for being communists. King didn't know how to mediate between Serb and Croat politicians. In June 1928, Serb politician Puniša Račić started shooting in the parliament. He killed 3 Croat politicians, including Stjepan Radić, and wounded another 2. Račić should have gotten death sentence. But Račić was the main witness on 1917 Salonika trial. Thanks to him, Apis was sentenced to death. Did this fact save Račić's life? He got 20 years in prison, served only 13 when Germans released him in 1941. It is believed that Račić was executed by partisans in 1944. There were many theories about the reasons behind Račić's actions in the parliament. Rather interesting conspiracy theory claims that King Alexander arranged for the shooting so that he could establish royal dictatorship. Indeed, he used the political crisis to justify the dictatorship. On 6 January 1929, King prorogued the parliament. The word prorogue means to discontinue a session of a parliament or another legislative assembly without dissolving it. King Alexander claimed that he wanted to unite people and create a Yugoslav nation. Ironically, he did manage to unite people in wanting him gone. King Alexander appointed a cabinet solely responsible to him. He changed the country's name to Yugoslavia. He divided the country to 9 banovinas, English provinces. Each banovina was governed by ban, translated as duke in English. Serbs never used the title ban, only Croats and Bosnians did. Each banovina was named after a river, except for literal banovina. Their borders were intentionally drawn so that they would not correspond to ethnic borders or historical borders. No one liked how borders were drawn, and the experiment with banovinas was a complete failure. Croats wanted banovina named Croatia. They put pressure until they got it in 1939. All banovinas were abolished in 1941 when Yugoslavia fell apart. King Alexander banned all political parties. He arrested many politicians, including Serb opposition politician Svetozar Pribičević. Pribičević was released in 1931 due to health problems. He went to Paris and lived in exile. In 1933, Pribicevic wrote a book in French called La dictature du roi Alexandre, English King Alexander dictatorship. Serb historians see this book as an important source because it was published while Alexander was still alive. On 28 June 1931, King adopted new Yugoslav constitution and announced the end of dictatorship. His dictatorship lasted 2.5 years, January 1929 to June 1931. There is no logical explanation why King officially ended his dictatorship. The situation in 1931 wasn't any better than in 1929. Serb and Croat politicians were still bitter rivals. There was no sense of brotherhood between South Slavs. King Alexander's strategy led to nothing. However, his dictatorship provoked even bigger problem. Ustaše were created as a reaction to dictatorship. During World War II, Ustaše killed many Serbs, Jews, Roma, and anti-Ustaše Croats. Ustaše founder Ante Pavelić was Croat lawyer and politician before 1929. One day after King's dictatorship was proclaimed, Pavelić unofficially formed Ustaše, 7th January 1929. The name comes from the word Ustati, which means to stand up. Ustaše were ultranationalistic revolutionary organization. Their main goal was to establish independent Croatia. Pavelić moved to Italy and started plotting against King Alexander. Pavelić had connections to Mussolini. Pavelić found allies in Macedonians. Unlike Ustaše, Macedonian VMRO was old organization. VMRO stands for Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. They were founded in 1893. Their initial goal was to establish autonomous Macedonia. In 1893, Macedonian territory belonged to Ottoman Empire. VMRO fought against Ottomans by using guerrilla tactics. During Balkan Wars, VMRO sided with Bulgarians. Territory Macedonians saw as theirs were partitioned by Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece. After World War I, VMRO wanted independent Macedonia. They had support of some Bulgarians. Bulgarian Prime Minister Aleksandar Stamboliski signed agreement with Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. VMRO was against this agreement. In 1923, VMRO killed Stamboliski. Approximately 300 Yugoslavs died in skirmishes with VMRO over the years. VMRO's base was Petric district in Bulgaria. They were like a state within a state. Ustaše and VMRO could work together because they didn't claim the same territories. Independent Croatia and independent Macedonia wouldn't even share a border. In early 1930s, VMRO was much stronger than Ustaše. King Alexander gave arrogant statements that only put target on his head. He said, "Shoot at me and be sure you have finished me off because that's the only way to make changes in Yugoslavia." Thanks to such public statements, Mussolini believed that Yugoslavia would fall apart if King was killed. Mussolini had reasons to want that to happen. Italy wanted Adriatic seaside that belonged to Yugoslavia. Significant number of Italians lived there. This was the reason why Mussolini sided with Pavelić. The political situation in Europe was slowly going towards a new war. In 1933, Hitler won the elections in Germany. French didn't like this. French Foreign Minister Louis Barthou wanted to form alliance against Germany. Barthou wanted alliance between France, Yugoslavia, Italy, and Soviet Union. He didn't understand such alliance was impossible. King Alexander refused to recognize Soviet Union as a state. And Mussolini and King Alexander were enemies. In June 1934, Barthou visited Belgrade to talk to King Alexander. It was arranged for King to visit France in October 1934. On 9 October 1934, King Alexander and Barthou were killed in Marseille, France. They were in an open car when shooters started firing from a pistol. Total number of 15 people were either killed or wounded. The actual moment of the shooting wasn't filmed. The camera caught moments before and after the shooting. The shooter was Vlado Chernozemski, ethnic Bulgarian. He had several fake names. Chernozemski had 3 Croat helpers. They were arrested, but Chernozemski was killed immediately after the shooting. Chernozemski was a member of VMRO and already killed several people before, including one Bulgarian communist politician. There were many rumors about the 1934 assassination. How much Mussolini was involved? In Italy, Pavelic was arrested, but he was released after 18 months. Many believe that Germany was somehow involved. Bartu wanted to form alliance against Germany. Killing both Bartu and King Alexander would destroy any possibility of an alliance. Germany would benefit from the assassinations. This theory was never confirmed. The 3 Croat helpers were arrested and trialed. They didn't stay long in the prison since Germans released them after occupying France in 1940. VMRO was the worst affected in the aftermath. Bulgarian army organized a military crackdown on Petric district. In 1934, VMRO was destroyed. But Ustaše remained active until 1945. After World War II, Croats living in exile formed small Ustaše-inspired groups. Ustaše ideology had certain revival during Yugoslav wars in 1990s. Far-right Serbs see all Croats as Ustaše, just like far-right Croats see all Serbs as Chetniks. It is impossible to say how influential Ustaše ideology is today. We should be vigilant because Ustaše ideology has potential to spread. Ustaše were smart to present themselves as anti-communists. Hardline anti-communists might be seduced by Ustaše. Can the same be said about Chetniks? Yes, Chetniks present themselves as monarchists and anti-communists. Anyone who is for the monarchy in Serbia is pushed towards Chetniks. But monarchy is not very popular in Serbia, partially thanks to King Alexander. What is the legacy of VMRO? There is a political party, VMRO DPMNE, in North Macedonia. Their enemies describe the party as pro-Serbian and anti-Bulgarian. Why? What? How? Today Bulgarians claim that Macedonian language is in fact dialect of Bulgarian. According to them, Macedonians are in fact Bulgarians. This is a huge problem between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. North Macedonia is candidate for EU membership. EU members have the right to put veto on expansion. It is expected that Bulgaria will put veto on North Macedonia joining EU. Some think that North Macedonia will never be able to join EU as a result of beef with Bulgaria. This is pure speculation, but it is possible. In short, there is no camaraderie between Macedonians and Bulgarians like there was in the 1930s. Today, Bulgarian Vlado Chernozemski wouldn't have worked for VMRO. Who should be blamed for King Alexander's assassination? I think only VMRO and Ustaše should be blamed. Bulgarians worked for VMRO. Mussolini helped Ustaše, but he wasn't the brain behind the assassination. It is hard to say who used whom in conspiracy between VMRO and Ustaše. VMRO was known for political assassinations like killing Bulgarian Prime Minister Stamboliski. VMRO was older organization than Ustaše. It is reasonable to assume that VMRO was stronger than Ustaše in 1934. But the shooter Chernozemski had 3 Croatian helpers. The main question is how strong was Pavelic in 1934? Was he the brain behind the conspiracy? I think responsibility for the killings should be on both VMRO and Ustaše. Serbian history books sometimes ignore VMRO's involvement and concentrate on Ustaše. Some focus on VMRO and ignore Ustaše. Very few mention Bulgarians and their role. If you ask Serbs who killed King Alexander, their answer will depend on the history book they read.